was when you looked at these two questions, okay, said, what are the names of the two types of reproduction? So part of your project guideline of what you looked up was trying to figure out which reproduction your organism went through. So who could tell us one of the reproductions that exists? Vin? Very good. Sexual reproduction. That's one of them. Okay? And get out your giggles now because it's going to be talked about a lot in here. All right? So with sexual reproduction, which category did that go with? Can reproduce by itself or needs a partner? Which one did that go with? Chris? Partner. Needs a partner. All right. So we have needs a partner. And there are two things that need to join when we're talking about sexual reproduction. Needs a partner. What two things need to join? Two cells that need to join. Anthony? Sperm and egg cell. Yes. Okay. Now, that might sound silly to you, but it doesn't just belong to humans, right? There are a lot of organisms that you just had up on the board here. Those of you that looked up moss, brook trout, tarantula, sea star, sponges, among others, all have sperm cells and egg cells, okay? So they have the ability to go through sexual reproduction, which you should have found out when you researched, okay? Now, the other type of reproduction is what? Bridget? Asexual reproduction. So I'm going to add that to our vocab list on the board here too. And in asexual reproduction, need a partner or it can reproduce by itself? Which one was it, Luke?
It can reproduce by itself.
All by itself. Okay, so no partner needed. Okay, and we're going to see what that looks like in a second. So we're going to be coming back to these terms because when we compare the three different cell divisions today, it's going to really be important that you have an understanding of those terms along with what we just put up on the board into our categories, unicellular, multicellular, prokaryote, eukaryote. All right? So that's why they will stay up on the board as part of our vocab list. Okay? So, Satch, if you want to hit the lights, please. Last week, along with yesterday with our review, we spent a lot of time on the cell cycle. Mitosis, right? Interphase started it, then mitosis, cytokinesis. We talked about yesterday that all that stuff is happening inside of where? What part of the cell? Who can raise their hand and tell us? So we've got all that stuff, DNA being copied, prophase with it all starting to get organized, and the sensor then lines up, splits apart, makes two identical cells. This all happens inside of where, Sam? The nucleus. Excellent. So that must mean that the organisms that go through that cell cycle that we learned about are which ones? Which ones that we just posted up on the board here? Which of these would be going through the cell cycle we just learned about with interphase, mitosis, and cytokinesis? Go ahead, Karina. How many agree with Karina? Yes. And why is that? Because eukaryotes have what, everybody? You got it. So those are the ones that are going through that whole cell cycle. Now, these guys over here are prokaryotes, are bacteria, don't have a what? No nucleus. So can they go through the mitosis that we've been learning about? No. So therefore, they go through this, what's up on the screen right now. Binary fission. Okay? So let's take a look at it. In binary fission, okay, most cells reproduce through some sort of cell division. All right? That's just the facts. That's, if we think back to when we learned about all living things have to be able to reproduce, right? They all also have to grow. They all respond to stimuli. All those things that we learned about, now we're going to come back into play and we're going to find out, well, depending on what organism, they do it a little bit differently. So they all have to reproduce through some sort of cell division. Prokaryotic cells, the ones we're talking about right now, divide through binary fission. It's a 3-step process. That's a lot more simple than the process we were learning about last week, right? A lot more steps were involved there. So let's look at the 3 steps. A single naked strand splits and forms a duplicate of itself. So if we look over here, here's our bacteria cell, okay? Here's the single naked strand of DNA in the center, right? Very simple. We know that there's some ribosomes in here, right? There's a cell membrane. But other than that, not much else going on in a bacteria cell. So then it makes a copy. So just like we learned in our last cell cycle, the DNA must be copied. Now we've got 2, right? All inside of the bacteria cell. Next step, the 2 copies move to opposite sides of the cell. So this copy moves over here, this copy moves over here, right? Last step, cell pinches into 2 new identical cells called daughter cells, just like we learned last week. So here's one, here's the second one. They're identical because they have the same DNA inside. So it's the same goal that we learned last week. We want to end up with 2 identical cells with the same DNA. But in this case, when it went through this process, was it a lot quicker than the one that we learned about last week? Yeah. Big time, right? And also, at the end of this bacteria cell now has how many bacteria? How many bacteria are there now? 2. There's 2. So this bacteria just went through what? Reproduction. You got it. Okay? Reproduction. So at the end, it has reproduced a whole nother bacteria. What's crazy about this and how quick it happens, if bacteria or other prokaryotes are put in ideal conditions, they can reproduce every 20 minutes. So you can imagine how quickly bacteria could accumulate, right? Very different from what we learned last week. So let's take a look at that now. Mitosis, right? Anytime I say mitosis, I'm referring to the whole cell cycle that we learned last week with interphase, mitosis, cytokinesis, all right? So this is going to look very familiar to you because this is what we spent a lot of time on. What kind of organisms can go through this? Eukaryotes. Very good. All right, so the eukaryotes divide by a more complicated system called mitosis. It's more complicated because these guys have a nucleus which must be broken up and then reformed. They have their DNA packaged in the form of chromosomes, okay? And those chromosomes are composed of chromatin. So that was just the stuff that we learned that came together to form the X's, right? That we were doing the pipe cleaners. So this stuff is made of the DNA strands and proteins. And when we're talking about mitosis, we're usually talking about more than just one chromosome. So unlike in binary fission, where it's just that single naked strand, these guys have a lot of chromosomes going on inside the nucleus that have to get reorganized. And that's why all that organization is necessary, because there's a lot going on. Because in humans, you guys told me they have how many chromosomes inside of each of our cells? 46, or in other words, 23 pairs. So with those 46, right, a lot of organization has to take place. So they also have all those other organelles that they have to equally share, those lysosomes, those vacuoles, all that good stuff, right? So that also has to be broken up. So what do you guys think? Is this going to take a lot longer than binary fission? Yeah. All right. So this should look familiar to us. Here's our overview, okay? We've seen these pictures before many times. So we're starting with which stage of the cell cycle? I put the letter up there for you. Some of you said it right. Go ahead. Interphase, right. This is also late interphase. You don't have to worry about that. There's early and late. Now we're ready for them all to come together for the next stage of mitosis. And mitosis starts with which one? Now we're all lined up for which phase? Metaphase. This is late metaphase. Then we have them splitting apart. And then we start to see it pinch off into? This is late telophase. And then finally? You got it. All right. So at the end, we have 2 identical cells with the same exact DNA inside. Same exact goal as the binary fission, right? Same goal. This one just took a little bit longer time because of the need to have those chromosomes all organized inside the nucleus. All right? So those 2 fairly simple to understand because this one we've gone over a lot. Binary fission is a quick 3-step process. Now it gets more complicated. Okay? Now we also have a division called meiosis. Meiosis. Although it sounds a lot more complicated, it's really not too bad because it's similar in many ways to mitosis, but there's several differences. It's going to involve 2 cell divisions. So all that stuff we saw happening in mitosis is going to happen all over again in meiosis. It happens twice. So at the end, you're going to see 4 cells with half the amount of DNA. Instead of the 2 identical cells that we're used to seeing, it's going to be 4 with half the amount of DNA. So let's take a look at what it looks like. Here we have, again, something that should look familiar. Here's what looks like prophase, right? All the chromosomes have come together in the center. We're going to see them line up like metaphase. We're going to see them split apart like anaphase. We're going to see them start to form 2 new cells in telophase, and then finally end in our cytokinesis. Here we have our 2 identical cells. This is what happens at the end of mitosis, right? But we're not done yet. In meiosis, now each of these is going to go through all that all over again. So although it looks like these 2 are together, they're not, okay? So this is one cell, this is a separate cell. Each of those now is going to go through prophase. Each of those is now going to go through metaphase. Each of those is now going to split apart for anaphase. They're going to start to break apart in telophase. And then our end result is 1, 2, 3, 4 cells with half the amount of DNA inside, right? So at the start of it here, where mitosis usually ends, over here, we have the same as our original parent, okay? But since it goes through this whole process again, at the end, we only have 4 cells with half the amount of DNA. So who can tell us what kind of cells would have this? Only half the amount of DNA. I'll give you a hint. Think about your cells, yourself, right? Where is half your DNA coming from and your other half of your DNA coming from? Brielle? Not your brain. Your parents. Mom, Dad. Half DNA, right? So that makes sense, right? But now let's think about it in terms of cell division. Which cells are we talking about that have half that amount of DNA? Go ahead, Nick.
Sperm cells and egg cells.
You got it. Sperm cells and egg cells. Good job. So who can remind us? That goes along with what kind of reproduction? The sexual reproduction. Very good. Needing sperm and egg cells. So here's where it gets harder to wrap your mind around, okay? So let's say this picture here is a female that went through this cell division. At the end, we have 4 egg cells, okay? Let's also imagine that this whole picture again happens over here, and that's a male that's going through it, and we end up with 4 sperm cells. Now, for reproduction to take place, 1 egg cell from this picture, 1 sperm cell from this picture have to come together to join. If we think about it in terms of a person, right? You told me a person has how many total chromosomes in 1 cell? 46. So that must mean that these 4 that end up in this picture at the end here, these 4 here, have how many? 23. Good. So those 23 chromosomes that are in this egg cell have to meet with the 23 chromosomes from this sperm cell over here, and when they join together, there's your full set of 46. That is the very first cell that starts a human being. Now, to grow all the other parts, and for cells to continue to divide to make the arms, the legs, the eyes, the nose, the heart system, right, all this other stuff, what does it have to go through? Think carefully. So we've got our egg cell, sperm cell together. how is it going to grow now all the parts? So the reproduction piece has now happened, right? Sperm cell and egg cell have joined. We have our starting first cell. But to create all those other cells to grow, we now need what process, Luke?
Cell cycle.
Yes, which includes, which division are we calling it today?
Cell division.
Well, they're all cell division. This one is
Mitosis.
mitosis, okay? But you're right, which is the cell cycle that we just learned about with interphase, mitosis, cytokinesis, all right? So, that's how you become a multicellular organism. You need both. Meiosis to reproduce, right? The egg cell and sperm cell have to be created, then joined, then mitosis for growth. And all those cells continue to divide. So this is the breakdown of it, which today might not make a whole lot of sense to you because tomorrow we're going to do more work with this. But you should have seen when you researched, when you were looking up some of your organisms that can go through asexual reproduction. Some of them are eukaryotes. So looking back to our board of eukaryotes again, which of them on here are unicellular that could go through asexual reproduction? So when they go through mitosis at the end, they've created a whole nother organism. Sneha? An amoeba's one. Good. What's another one up here? Satchit? Paramecium. These two, when they go through mitosis, at the end, these guys, right, if we're talking about an amoeba, we start with one amoeba. At the end of this process, we have how many amoebas? Which kind of reproduction did they just go through? Asexual, okay? Same thing with the paramecium. We could start with one paramecium, at the end up with two. They've just gone through asexual reproduction. But if we're talking about these other guys that are up here, all these other multicellular ones, they need not just meiosis, right, to join an egg and sperm cell, but now they need mitosis to grow. There's a couple organisms out there that can do both, and that's where we're going to be focused tomorrow, where we're going to start to see different video clips of how some of these multicellular guys can also do asexual reproduction by mitosis. So a piece of them could possibly break off, and they can go through cell division through mitosis to create a whole nother one. And we'll see more of that tomorrow. Bridget? A planarian is a cool one because they can be, go ahead Nick, I know you found out about it. You want to tell us?
They have both sex organs, so we only have one if you're male or female, but they have both. So they could like have a partner or they could do both.
So yes, that's one way they can do it. So they have egg cells and sperm cells that are created in one body, and they could just by themselves have the egg cell and sperm cell join and create one. But they also, did you find something else about them, Hannah?
Well, like it said that it had like cool classroom activities. It said like if you cut it in half, it'll grow 2 new ones.
Yes, a planarian actually can be cut up into 20 different pieces and grow into 20 new worms. Planarians are worms, okay? So, fragmentation, that's up here on the screen, is referring to that type of reproduction. And again, we're going to see some more of these things tomorrow. So, big ideas from today. If you're a eukaryote and you go through mitosis and you create a whole other organism, you've just gone through what? Asexual reproduction, right? You're using which division for that? Mitosis, meiosis, or binary fission? Go ahead, say it if you know it. Mitosis. Good. If you're a prokaryote and you've gone through cell division and you end up now with a whole nother organism you've just gone through, asexual reproduction. This time you used which cell division? Binary fission. If you're a eukaryote and multicellular, typically you're going to need to go through which reproduction? Using what division? Well, where's the reproduction part? Meiosis, right? Creating those sperm cells and egg cells. Then it has to join. Then they're going to grow through which cell division? All right. And we're going to do more work with that tomorrow. So if that's still a little shaky, don't worry, because this is your very first introduction to it. All right.